Welcome, everyone, to episode 10 of the MBE Enterprise Podcast, where we talk about money, business, and entrepreneurship with some of the brightest business minds I know. Today, I am joined by aerospace engineer, founder, and CEO of ParaWave, Adithya Ramaswamy. Adithya, how are we doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. Thank you for asking. It's always a fun day when I get to do another one of these podcast episodes. I really enjoy it, talking to people about business, money, entrepreneurship, startups. What can be better, right?
Hey, I'm happy to be here and thank you for the invite.
Dude, I'm excited to talk. So I want to get right into it here with you.
Let's do it.
You told me you just started going full time with your startup that you founded, are the chief executive officer of ParaWave. Let's tell everyone a little bit about ParaWave and kind of what you guys are up to over there.
Yeah. So ParaWave is a drone company engineering drone solutions for the emergency and first response space. So our goal is in any emergency or situation, quickly getting a bird's eye view to analyze the situation and then help triage critical resources to help save lives. So both me and my co-founder, Jack Murray, we both just graduated with our bachelor's in aerospace engineering just a few months ago from Ohio State. So we're proud to be Buckeyes. We started up ParaWave last year while we were undergraduate students, and we're really excited to be working on ParaWave full-time, officially from the summer.
Take me back now a little bit, Adithya, to the origins of ParaWave. How did this kind of start? Was it in your mind? Was it a collective effort? Take us back a little bit to just really the beginning, the birthplace of ParaWave.
Absolutely. Well, both Jack and I have a lot of experience in the drone space. So we was late 2021. We were both like, hey, we both like drones. Like, let's start a business. So we had brainstormed quite a few different ideas of different drone businesses that we'd like to pursue. And then I mentioned like, hey, like, why don't we engineer drones for emergency situations to help save lives and use drones to get a bird's eye view, help analyze any situation, and to help first responders do their jobs. So it was an exciting idea. We're both like, hey, this sounds good. But neither Jack or I had any first responder experience whatsoever. So then we had reached out to departments. We had met with a lot of incredible first responder departments in the Columbus area, gained some really valuable feedback in terms of how can drones help save lives. It was really inspiring to hear their stories, their challenges, the work that they do, and how drone solutions can better help them as well as help keep the communities that they serve safer. So that was really inspiring and just lit a huge fire for us to take our passion for drone technology, our drive as engineers to help create solutions and to help support our local communities and help build safer communities. Jack has a ton of experience in the drone space. For me, I'd started up Ohio State's first drone competition team to help build a platform for students to learn about the exciting potential of drone technology, as well as the advanced air mobility space in terms of what can electric aircrafts do to really revolutionize the way that individuals interact with our national airspace system. So that was really, really exciting. It was a competition team too, and just getting students excited about how do you build drones, because the potential of drones is limitless. Jack had also a lot of experience in the drone space too, and we both were really excited to work together. He's a phenomenal friend and an incredible co-founder too. So it has been an incredible journey. We've been working on ParaWave for more than a year and a half now, and we're getting ready to launch our first drone later on this fall. And we're so grateful for all the support that we've received. Back in 2022, we had competed in Ohio State's inaugural President's Buckeye Accelerator, which awards $50,000 to student ventures for students to work on their business while simultaneously completing their degrees. And we're really, really grateful and thankful to have been a part of that inaugural cohort, receive the $50,000 to start up our business, as well as be supported while also completing our engineering degrees as well.
Adithya, you mentioned how you guys got into the first responder emergency kind of space, that you decided to move forward with that when you had already established that you were going to be working with drone technology, as you guys obviously had the background in that as well. Were there other categories or potential areas of interest as far as different subjects for what you guys wanted to work on with drones that obviously didn't come to fruition but were maybe considered?
Absolutely. We had brainstormed a couple ideas. It's funny now when we look back at it, like, oh gosh, that would not have been. It might have been fun for like a few months, but not something that would have really ignited our passion to stick with it. So we had thought about doing drone light shows because we thought like, oh, like drone light shows would be super cool and something fun. We had thought about doing drones for photography, maybe drones for like package deliveries, things like that. But we wanted to do something that was very meaningful to us. And to us, that was engineering drones with a purpose, being very purpose driven. And that was to engineer drones to help save lives. And that is our like our mission as a company, drone saving lives, of how can we engineer drone technologies to help build safer communities and to help save people during any emergency or situation. I mean, our world is constantly evolving. Things are constantly changing too. So we wanted to do something that was very meaningful to us, and that was also really important too in terms of helping us get through some difficult challenges and hurdles as well. Because when you're it was during our last year of undergrad, so we're busy with capstone projects, senior classes, and we're also starting a business from the ground up. I mean, time is intense, but we were really passionate about what we were doing. So even if it was those super late nights or very hectic schedules for weeks on end, it was worth it because we were really passionate about what we were doing. And we found that passion through building drones for the emergency and first responder industries.
I'm glad you touched on that. There's quite a few subjects I want to delve into that you brought up, but the first one was kind of that passion that you guys do have for it. I think that's something with any entrepreneurship venture, all entrepreneurs, they really have to have that underlying passion. And for you listeners, I know we talk about this a lot, but getting into it just purely for the money, like a lot of people think of, it's not going to allow you oftentimes to get over the hurdles that will be required to really make it big. That underlying passion that people have and that intrinsic motivation for doing what they're doing is extremely important anytime you're doing anything like where you have to venture off, go out on your own, start something from scratch. It's just so extremely important. And I'm really glad to hear that you guys obviously have that. And I didn't doubt that you did, but it's just great to hear that because that's just a sign that they got another thing going for them. Like they're more likely to succeed if that really is the case. And it's not just, financially driven. Another thing you touched on were some of the potential hurdles that you guys have been able to get over because of that passion and because of that drive. And that's something I wanted to ask about too. What have been some of the major, I'm sure there's been many, right? As with any industry, but the difficulties really with starting this emergency response drone company that you guys are.
Yeah. Well, to your original point too, I think perseverance is a big thing that any entrepreneur faces, of persevering through challenges, setbacks. But one of the biggest drivers of perseverance is passion. If you're really passionate about what you're doing, you're able to persevere through those challenges and those setbacks. It's still difficult. Like, don't get me wrong. Like those setbacks and moments of like, oh gosh, like why? Like moments of big frustrations. Like passion does not necessarily help at those moments, but it helps the entrepreneur like persevere through that and find innovative solutions to jump across those hurdles. To your question of some of the challenges that we face, it was two. I'll touch upon kind of the student experience as well, because student entrepreneurship is really, really, really unique. of you're surrounded by peers that are maybe doing some of the stereotypical like opportunities of like internship or research or looking to like apply for jobs or full-time positions. But then students that are starting their own business, it's a whole new space, it's a whole new like ecosystem of drive and tenacity and doing something like incredibly different than maybe the students that are in your classroom. And for us, our last year of undergrad, I think one of the biggest the challenges was time. We are bouncing around a bunch of different things. How do we effectively manage our time to make sure we're putting time into ParaWave? And we always make time for ParaWave, whether it be at like 1 a.m. in the morning or like maybe responding to emails during class. Probably is not something we should have done too often, but I mean, when back's against the wall and you have to get work done, you do what you have to and you multitask like crazy. But the time aspect was really, really interesting. I think that's something that a lot of student entrepreneurs face. So how do you balance the time to get the things you still have to get done for completing your degree, but also how do you make time for the business that you're starting? That's a really, I think, an interesting area. And also student entrepreneurs finding communities with other student entrepreneurs too. I think that's really empowering of like, hey, you're not alone. Like I think all student entrepreneurs can relate to just challenges, but also the excitement to innovate and build and to disrupt whatever industry that they're going into and doing something really unique and something that they're passionate about. So I think time was something that was a definitely an interesting challenge. So we were really excited to be going to ParaWave full time after we graduated because now we get to work on ParaWave full time. Things are still difficult, challenging, especially with working with a limited budget at times. But we're really excited to be doing what we're doing as well.
You bring up time management, and that I think that's just also an extremely common one for entrepreneurs, right? Especially young ones. You mentioned being in school, having to do this stuff, sometimes working during class, essentially multitasking like that. Let's dive a little deeper into your thoughts kind of on the work life, even social, maybe student balance that entrepreneurs face. Is there perhaps advice, types of things that you have learned on how to better balance all of those facets that you would maybe suggest to young entrepreneurs or newer entrepreneurs as well?
Yeah. I think that there's no perfect solution to the best time management. There's a lot of tips and tricks and ideas and frameworks that people can implement into approaching effective time management. But I always tell people like take everything with a grain of salt and do what works best for you, and constantly find innovative ways to manage your time. I know that the word time management is used heavily, like how do you manage your time? But I think that it's a work in progress and every week's different. And for entrepreneurship in general, every day is different. Every week is different. So an element of flexibility is really, really critical, but also a structure to hold yourself accountable to make sure you're still getting the work that needs to get done. So I think that the biggest advice that I have is find a balance between taking the time to do the things you need to do, have structure, but have flexibility in that structure. So depending on whatever is thrown at you, you can juggle it around, but still effectively get the things you need to get done. One of the biggest things that I used to do when I was in college is put too much on my plate. And I still think I do that. But I learned the importance of whatever I'm doing to be passionate about it or be interested about it, because it's work is work, but if you enjoy the work that you're doing, it's a lot more fun. You're able to put that passion behind it and you're able to deliver much better quality results. There's some things you have to get done that no one likes to do, and you just have to do it for the sake of doing it. But seek out opportunities that you're passionate about, diversify your experiences, step outside your comfort zone, allow time in your schedule per week to breathe just a little bit, to also explore new things and to challenge your mindset to continue growing. I think that's a really really foundational for any aspect of time management, of have structure but have flexibility, and be okay with things not being okay, because there might be some weeks you don't get everything you need to get done, but that's okay. Every week's a fresh start, and having that positive mindset, and being honest with yourself too, and being honest with those around you. If you miss a deadline, owning up to it. If you say you're going to do something, then you don't, owning up to that as well, and holding yourself accountable in terms of how you approach the time that you have.
Holding yourself accountable, discipline, perseverance, structure. I think all those things you just touched on there are extremely important. How have you personally been able to hold yourself accountable, keep yourself disciplined to doing what you need to do? Because that's another issue that oftentimes new entrepreneurs will face, is the idea of, I have this idea, I've worked on it for a bit, and now it's looking difficult. I'm running into some challenges, and I maybe, I bring it up in the past, shiny object syndrome. I see this new idea and I want to work on that because now I see the massive potential that has. And you lose sight of your original vision and staying true to what you really were doing and that passion that you originally had. And I think that's why passion is so key. I think it's so easy to fall into shiny object syndrome when you are just doing things for the money, for example, where when you have that intrinsic drive and that intrinsic passion going for you, I think that really helps with that perseverance side. But what are some maybe examples of times where you've had to, rely on your discipline, or not punish yourself, but hold yourself accountable for missing maybe a deadline, or while also not being too hard on yourself as well?
Yeah. You brought up a really, really great point. So with passion's great to persevere, to push through, to do something that you enjoy, but sometimes it can also cause us to be blind in terms of, are we doing the things that we need to get done? So this is something I implemented just like last year's, on my calendar. I do a pretty decent job of like kind of charting out like, what am I doing throughout the day, like blocking out my time of like, hey, I'm setting time aside to do this, and setting a time aside to do this task, or focusing on getting a bunch of these tasks done, or whether it be for business development, product development, like working on the actual aircraft. How am I spending my time throughout the week? So, all right, I'm really passionate about what I'm doing. These are my goals for the next like 2-3 weeks of what I want to get done. And then those 2-3 weeks pass. I force myself to look at, how was my time spent these past 3 weeks? Like, okay, I had this goal. I wanted to achieve this or get to this milestone. How have I spent my time throughout the past few weeks in terms of reaching that goal? And I have a really honest, like, self-reflection moment of, I say that I'm passionate about this, I say that I'm working towards this goal, but am I making sure that I put the time in throughout my week or in my schedule to achieve that goal? And time goes by quickly. That was another thing that, like looking back, it's like, oh gosh, like since we started, since ParaWave was born in early 2022, I mean, it's been over a year and a half. Like, time goes by quickly looking back on things, but we've grown a ton, we've learned a lot. But there's been a couple different milestones since our journey. And I always joke that calendar invites are just my calendar keeps my life together. But in terms of that time management structure too, I also look at, how am I spending my time each week? Where can I allocate more time into the things that are more important to me? And what are areas where I'm like, hey, like maybe multitasking too much and not being very efficient with my time? How can or am I doing things that are unnecessary or things that can wait? Am I doing a good job prioritizing the things that I need to get done? And that's something that it's always a work in progress. Like, there's no perfect solution to time management. And I think holding yourself accountable is the best way to do that, is looking back on, taking a step back, looking at your calendar, looking at the things that you're doing constantly, and seeing where areas, like, do I feel happy with where I'm at? Like, do I feel that I'm getting to where I'm going? And do I feel that I'm being honest with myself in terms of how I'm navigating that journey? You mentioned of you joked of like self-punishment, like how do you hold it? Like, if, let's say if you're not, like, how do you, I think that I would never say that there was like a self punch where I was like, oh gosh, like how dare you, Adithya, like I'm yelling at myself. I've never done that, but I always take a step back of like, okay, like I'm gonna try and do better. Like, okay, I'm going to work on this, or I'm going to be more thoughtful and more mindful of how I approach that. And it's just an honest conversation with myself, like just keeping that positive mindset, because there's no week that's going to be perfect. There's no, like, nothing's perfect. Nothing is black or white. But everything's a work in progress. So keeping that positive mindset. And I feel that's also really uplifting too. Because let's say something doesn't go out as intended, but then I'm like yelling at myself like, oh my gosh, and like then I like wave guilt and anger and frustration. Like that's wasted energy that I can be putting into something else more productive. I should still have that moment where I recognize like I did not do the things that I needed to do, and having that moment of like, all right, Aditya, that was not a good job, and being having that honest conversation, that mindful moment, but then picking myself back up and moving forward with a positive mindset. And I've really, for the past 2 years specifically, I've really focused in terms of mindset, and it's been really empowering too, with all the work that I've done, and also with the people that I work with too. And that's been it's been very uplifting.
I think you structured all of that very, very eloquently. And I like that you bring up the idea of structure and flexibility and fluidity, because that allows you to, at least in my mind, it allows you to, you have to have that structure to keep you on track, keep your eyes focused on the right point out in the future, right? But also the ability to have that flexibility, that fluidity to make adjustments, make time allocation adjustments where you see necessary, where you see fit. I think that's extremely important for, people could set up this schedule. And I think it's one of the guru kind of ideas of one size fits all, do this, do that. Having a schedule, blocking out times. I think that is one that is beneficial, but you have to be adjustable with it. If you make one schedule and you're like, I'm going to do this for the next year, that is a step in the right direction, right? But you're going to need to make adjustments along the way. And it may sound obvious, but it's that blend of knowing, okay, when do I need to make changes? When do I need to make time allocation adjustments to my schedule? And when do I need to actually do what needs to get done? Because you may just be thinking, oh, I don't want to do this thing, so I'm going to allocate more time to this. But having that honest reflection with yourself, like you mentioned, of, okay, no, what actually does need to get done? Not necessarily just, like you said, it's still work, right? And with all work, even when you love it, there are certain aspects of it that you have to do that you maybe don't enjoy quite as much, or at least until you get to about $1 billion and you can just hire out absolutely everything that you don't want to do. But until you get to that point, entrepreneurship is certainly work as well.
Being present in the moment too. Like if you're doing something, but you're spending a lot of time thinking about what you're going to be doing next, you're not giving attention to the things that you need to do present in the moment. I think being very intentionally present with what you're doing is, I think, really is something that I struggled with, because before I'd always be like thinking about all the other things I have to do. And I'm like, if I'm doing that for every task of worrying about what I'm going to be doing next, I'm not giving the time that I need to be focusing on the things I need to do now. So that was a really interesting, I think, moment of self-discovery that I didn't realize before. And you brought up a good point. Like everyone also has a really different balance between structure and flexibility. Like some people are really efficient and their best ideas come when their entire schedule is super flexible. For others, they need that structure in order to be efficient and to drive results. So every person's different, and I think everyone has to be open to finding that best balance for them.
And another excellent thing you touched on was the idea of goal setting as well. And that, like you just said, some people may rely on more structure, others may require, a little more creativity, a little more fluidity throughout their day, flexibility. But having those kind of long-term or at least intermediate goals that you can still be shooting towards and still be expecting to achieve, that will allow you to kind of get some feedback as well, some objective feedback kind of did I accomplish it, right? Did I accomplish this task or did I not? Then maybe was it a too difficult of a task to ask myself, or should I be allocating my time differently? So I think that blend that unique blend of structure and flexibility is just so extremely important whenever you're scheduling out. But I do think the scheduling idea itself is, in most cases anyway, extremely beneficial. Switching gears here a little bit, Adithya, one other thing you brought up was the idea that while you were a student and also working on a startup venture, one of the benefits that I see that having is the idea of mentorship. And you're constantly around people, at university who are there to help you, are there to guide you, right? That is one of the crucial benefits, I think, or huge benefits of it. Can you speak a little bit on how mentorship has played a role in not only your own life, but maybe in the life of the journey of ParaWave as well?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. ParaWave, ParaWave, and also our individual selves as just professionals or as students. I guess I'll first try and talk about through my lens, both in my personal life as well as in ParaWave as a startup. We've been really, really blessed to have some phenomenal mentors that have not only helped identify opportunities or just guidance and just positive reinforcement, being that individual that's like, hey, like, you're doing a good job, or providing that like honest feedback, but also that encouragement to keep pushing us to the next level. I've been so lucky to have some really phenomenal mentors through even through high school and then through college. Like, if we looked at any different like period in time, like there's every year's look different for the past like 5 to 10 years. I think that's for everybody, but I've been really lucky throughout like many different like milestones or different like, I guess, eras of my life journey. I've been really lucky to have some phenomenal mentors, and I would not be where I am today without those mentors. And for ParaWave too, being a part of the Keenan Center for Entrepreneurship at Ohio State, which is where the President's Buckeye Accelerator was housed. We had some phenomenal mentors there that not only understood what it means to be an entrepreneur, but really strive to create a community of student entrepreneurship where other student ventures is a safe space for any student entrepreneur to exist and to be in, and to grow. I mean, that we learn so much from mentors, but we also learn so much from our fellow peers. And it's a really encouraging space to be in. So I think the aspect of community is so important. And in terms of mentors, knowing that you can reach out to them at any time, I think that was something that was so was so impactful, of knowing like if there was anything that happened, like a huge, like a really big hurdle, or just like someone to talk to or to help bounce ideas off of, like having those mentors just to have a conversation. It's a safe space where you can talk about anything, and they're not going to judge you. They're just only going to be there to help support and empower you. I think mentors play a critical role in so many people's lives and so many professionals' lives. And I think it's really also up to the mentee to show that appreciation and to say like, hey, like thank you. Because I think that it's also up to the mentee, maybe in like 10-15 years, or whenever they're possible, to then pay it forward, and then helping to support other student entrepreneurs, helping to support other people that are entering the entrepreneurial space, and kind of passing it forward and paving it forward, and helping to pave it forward for other students to follow, because it's a journey. And that is that's so important, just as an entire community, as an entrepreneurial community as a whole. When we empower each other, we rise together. And I think that messaging is really important. And finding the right mentor, that's also important too. If it doesn't click between the mentee and the mentor, like, that's okay. But finding the right mentor that is respectful of your aspirations, is accepting of who you are without judgment, and appreciates you and respects you for who you are. Those are really critical elements. And also a mentor that is willing to help you without getting anything in return. And that's really, really special. And finding those mentors can be a challenge. But I can say on behalf of the ParaWave team, and also just for myself as an individual, I've been really, really lucky to have some phenomenal mentors in my life. And also the mentors turn to be friends also, when it's also been a couple of years too. So it's an exciting time.
I really like one of the things you brought up about paying it forward.
Yeah.
And before I touch on that, I would just like to bring up one more, I think, key quality of a mentor, and that is the ability to help you and give you constructive feedback without, like you mentioned, belittling you or in any way like that, but also being willing to, tell you when they think that something's not quite right, or this needs an adjustment. I think that's another huge quality. And it's funny because this comes up in every episode. So for anyone wanting to be an entrepreneur, I think the concept of mentorship is so extremely important, because everyone we talk to here, they talk about how influential it was in their life, and not only having a mentor, but seeking them out to find one, and then finding and sifting through the one that is really right for them. Because there are mentors who mean well, but maybe just aren't the right fit for you at that time. But the idea of having one, was that something that you ever had to get over? I know some people they'll think that they were confident in their own abilities and they just kind of want to do things their own way. And I think that confidence is necessary, but being able to, check your ego at the door in a way and accept the help and seek out the help from mentors and peers that you, like you mentioned as well. Was that something that was ever a challenge for you, or was that something that came a little more naturally to you?
Yeah, that's a great point. Before I answer that question, another point that I want to make too about mentors. Some of the best mentors also allow you to figure things out by yourselves, and then they chime in at the right time, and they're really good on timing, and that's so important. But maybe some people need that overbearing, like, constant feedback. Some mentees really benefit from just having that space and freedom and to like check in as needed. But a mentor is able to assess the timing and able to understand when to give that feedback. And that comes with a lot of intuition and wisdom of knowing when to give that feedback, and having that sound timing. To your recent question of have I always sought out mentors, I've always welcomed feedback, always welcomed constructive criticism. Some of the the mentors that I have the most respect for are the ones that gave me some very difficult feedback. And that to me shows that they cared enough to give the constructive feedback in a very kind but firm way. And they weren't worried about, like, oh, like, is it going to be upset with me or whatnot. They cared more about helping me recognize and improve. And that to me was really valuable, of like, they had the trust to give that constructive feedback, but they also cared about me to give that feedback. Mentors that are unable or not able to give feedback, the mentor-mentee relationship, I don't think it's as beneficial to the mentee. Mentors that are able to give feedback and are able to call out the mentee saying, hey, like, that's not great, or that's not, like, there's another way to do it, or you are not doing the things that you need to be doing. That is that also takes a lot of confidence in the mentor too. It's up to the mentee to also to listen, to be open to that feedback. But if you're listening to feedback, or let's say a mentor is giving ideas and suggestions to the mentee, and the mentee chooses not to listen to that feedback, it's really important for the mentee to explain to the mentor why they didn't do the thing that they asked, or what was that reasoning. Because if a mentor is giving advice to a mentee and then the mentor sees, like, hey, that mentee is not listening to me whatsoever, they're not going to feel inclined to keep giving feedback. Like, there's no contractual agreement between the mentor and mentee. The mentorship can stop at any moment. But it's on the onus on the mentee to give that explanation to the mentor, like, hey, like, this is why I chose to do this different. I really appreciate your feedback, but this was my reasoning, and this is why I approached it a different way. And giving that explanation, because it really provides an open conversation between both the mentor and the mentee to continue that relationship. And for me, I've always been open to feedback, and people that have said, hey, Adithya, like, this is some feedback that I have for you. But a lot of my mentor mentor mentee. A lot of my mentors, they became mentors after I've worked with them or I've known them for some time. It was never like the first conversation I had with them and then they became a mentor. It usually happened like a year or two later, where then I started viewing them as a mentor. And then I also would tell them to, like, I'm so grateful for your mentorship, and like, thank you for taking the time to be a mentor to me. But that took a couple of years to develop that relationship as well. So for me, it always happened very genuinely and authentically. Um, I've never gone to someone saying, "Hey, I want you to be a mentor," after like a 5-minute conversation. I feel that, I think mentors pick the mentee. I don't. I think sometimes mentees can ask for a mentor or seek out a mentor or ask directly, "Hey, like, can you be my mentor?" But I think some of the best mentorship relationships are the ones where the mentor picks the mentee and the mentee respects the mentor, and that it's sometimes a flip of a coin. It happens through life chance and a one-off conversation, or sometimes it happens after a couple years of knowing someone.
I like what you said there about the mentor picking the mentee. And I would add that I think sometimes, at least in my experience, it's also nonverbal, right? It's not necessarily a, hey, that we've had a good relationship, I'd like to mentor you. I think it's a little more of, you just know, like in my experience, I feel like the mentors that I have currently and have had in different, stages of life in the past, you kind of just know, you pick up the innuendos, the nuanced behavior of like, okay, yeah, this person would definitely be open to me asking them more questions about this, or looking to them, seeking more advice in this area and that area. And I think that's extremely important for the mentee to recognize, and realize that, yeah, like would this be a good fit? And the fact that you brought up the relationship building as well, not just seeking someone, random person out right away who's successful in business and being like, hey, I want you to mentor me. If you're trying to go that route, at least try and get to know them a little bit beforehand, show some interest in what they're doing, genuine interest, and that sort of thing. But yeah, really learning from the connections that you have. And that's why networking, not networking in a superficial way, but having a network as a whole is so important, because then you have just a variety of people you can reach out to for information, and that you trust will, have your best interest at heart for the most part. And I think that is extremely important as well. You mentioned something as well, which was, you think the mentees, right? Us, we have a kind of a duty or responsibility to also give back, either right away, right now as we speak, or at a future date. Are there some things you are perhaps currently doing to give back as a mentor yourself of sorts, or plans that you maybe have made to really kind of pay it back to those people that, or pay it forward, I guess, to those people that will be going through what you have gone through and will go through?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm very much more in the mentee role than the mentor role. Very much, especially for entrepreneurship, very much on the mentee side of things, of receiving the, because I very much on the early stage and building from the ground up, and there's so much that I have yet to learn, and
It's a good answer.
very very I have a lot to learn, but the areas that I am able to support, I've, especially after starting ParaWave 2, I had a couple of people, like students, like ask questions or just interested or just very curious, because for I think a lot of students in college, it's get your degree, go get a job, or maybe do research or do grad school, or like seek out a job after your education. But rarely the student's like, oh, like, I'm going to start my own business, or I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Or maybe a student starts a side business, but their main goal is to still go into like industry, or like government, like, or any full-time job after college. But in terms of like my, I guess, mentorship, I've had quite a few students ask me, like, or like show interest, like, hey, like, I'm actually interested in starting a business, or like I'm like thinking about like doing this, or like, hey, like, I'm kind of curious into diving into like starting something up myself. And for me, a lot of my help has been, or paying it forward, is pointing out resources, like saying, hey, like there's this opportunity, or like check out this like group on campus, or like getting them connected with different opportunities that are available. But also then, not for me, not coming across as this it's this super unachievable thing. It's like being very open and honest of like, it's fun, it's exciting, like, and doing something that you're passionate about, and giving the advice that I have of, hey, like, it's not like this thing of starting a business, like this unachievable thing, like you can do it too. Like, it is like, find something you're passionate about, take as much time as you need to figure things out, because it definitely took me a long time to figure things out, and it took me a long time to also identify as an entrepreneur too. It wasn't like the minute I started Para, I was like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, it took a time to embrace that identity and to develop that conviction of being an entrepreneur. So the biggest, I think, mentorship in terms of paying it forward is students that are interested in kind of diving into the space more, of being very honest and transparent of my journey, and letting the students that are interested around me understand that this is also a journey that they can take too. I think that it can be very easy for an individual to say, like, to constantly like to show off and like act like this is like, oh, like it's like no one else can do this, and it's like this is only like. But I think that I've very much served as being very genuine, authentic, and very honest. And I think that's been my way of kind of paving it back to the student entrepreneurial community. And through the Keenan Center of Entrepreneurship too, serving as a kind of like a near peer mentor of like a student that's maybe just like a little bit older than the current students that are like working on their ventures. Because you can talk to someone that has like 20 years of experience, but if you talk to someone that's just like just a little bit older than you, that is still very much in the same boat, it can be very comforting too. And also it helps build that student entrepreneurial base. But I in terms of being passing it forward, still very much on the mentee side of things. Still have a lot to learn, but I've also very much focused on the community aspect of helping to uplift others and students that are interested in stuff. Like, it's like, hey, check out this event, or like, hey, like, check this out, or like, let me know if you have any questions, or feel free to reach out anytime if you ever want to grab coffee or chat. And just being very open to supporting other students as well.
Certainly, yeah, I think that's an important distinguishment to make, to know, when you still have a lot to learn, right? You want to pass people on to the best resources that you've found, because you maybe aren't that resource yet, right? You have more to learn. I think that's a very admirable thing to do as well, and to understand that other people or other resources might be what's most beneficial to them at that time, but then still being that peer mentor in a way,
being that
to
friend.
influence. Yeah, exactly. To help influence them as well. Another thing I want to bring up here, switching gears a little bit, but you did mention it, the idea of when you kind of realized you were an entrepreneur. I feel like a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, some entrepreneurs have that specific moment, right? That they're like, this is it, right? This is it for me. Did you have one of those, or have you kind of always had the entrepreneurial spirit? How has your mindset either, maybe stayed the same or shifted as far as that goes?
Yeah, I've for a very long time, especially for the past like 6 to 8 years, I've been very much a self-starter of starting something from nothing, and then bringing people together, building teams, empowering other people, and creating those focus groups of whether it be like a friendship, or like a team to tackle on a challenge, or building micro communities around something. And it also team building. Team building is a very important skill set for any entrepreneur to have, especially when you're building a team and building a business from the ground up. Being able to bring those around you to start something new and to pave that path together. So team building, empowering those around you, and starting something from nothing. But I guess the nothing, there truly is like, I always keep saying like, oh, building from the ground or building from nothing, but it's not nothing, it's you, and you are something. And I think that's a really important something for everyone to keep in mind of, you are something, and you're building you're building something from the ground up, but you are that ground up. And when you bring people together, that's a launching pad of innovation and just disruptive creativity. In terms of recognizing when I was an entrepreneur, I've always had moments where I started a lot of really exciting things, and it always came from passion of like, oh my god, I'm interested in doing this, like let's do this. But in terms of identifying as an entrepreneur, that really happened my last year of undergrad, where I developed that conviction of I'm really passionate about this. I'm really passionate about what I'm doing, and I am an entrepreneur. Because before, especially when I started Para, I was like, oh yeah, I'm starting a business. But I would never say like, oh, like I'm an entrepreneur, because like I didn't feel that like that identity just yet, and that moment of that moment that it really hit me, it was actually earlier on this year. It was when I had a moment. I forgot when it happened, but I had a moment where I said, I really care about ParaWave. I really care about what I'm doing. I'm really passionate about this. And like I embraced it. I embraced the idea of building a business and building something that I'm really passionate about. And then I clicked of like I am an entrepreneur. Like I am a self-starter. And then I took a moment to reflect back on the past like 5-6 years, and I was like, oh my gosh, like there were so many moments where I started something or I built something from the ground up, or I completely changed how a structure was. Is like, let's do something different, and really going out of my way to do that. But I always maybe identified as like a self-starter, or like doing something that's like unique and creative, but I never really identify as an entrepreneur. And I think that's a lot of students or a lot of individuals face that. Like they have aspects of entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is, it's not just like a specific set of skills. As entrepreneur, it's a very dynamic word, and it represents a lot of different things. And I think there's a lot more people out there that have those skill sets to be an entrepreneur, and they recognizing that too, like, hey, I'm a self-starter, or like, hey, I'm okay with being a little disruptive, or like, hey, like I'm okay with like being creative in how I'm approaching things, and then recognizing that that feeds into being an entrepreneur as well. So I think that was kind of my mindset shift, and that was really empowering, especially when I identified as an entrepreneur. Like when I said that I was like, I'm going to ParaWave full time, I'm doing this, like I feel really like proud. I feel excited. Like I feel that intrinsic motivation of I validated myself, and I'm not relying on anybody else to validate me. Like I have validated myself. I'm really excited to be on the journey that I am. The journey is not the clearest. It's not a linear path. There's going to be a ton of challenges in the next 5-10 years. I can have an idea of what that plan is going to be, but it's definitely going to be a rocky journey. But I know whether it's going to be now or 10 or 15, 20 years later, I'm still going to be an entrepreneur. And I don't know where life is necessarily going to take me, but I'm really excited for it. And I know that whatever challenges there are too, I'm going to be able to innovate and overcome that and persevere through it. So I think that identity components really is really important, because it feeds into the passion, it feeds into the perseverance, it feeds into that innovative thinking, and it feeds into that community as well.
What was the experience like reflecting on the decision to take ParaWave full time? Because I think that is every entrepreneur's end goal, obviously, is to be able to work full time on their venture. Take us through kind of your reflection, the factors that went into that decision. And that had to be a super, I'm sure, nerve wracking, but also joyful experience as well.
Definitely nerve-wracking, definitely difficult. I say that with a smile now, because I'm looking back and I'm like, oh gosh, like that was it was definitely a very turbulent decision-making process, because I mean, it's funny because like since you're like K through 12 or you're in college, you always think like, oh, get a degree, go get a job, or go to grad school. I was actually pre-med for my through K through 12. I always thought like I'm going to go to med school, and then I found a much stronger passion for engineering in college, and I switched into engineering, and one thing led to another. But the idea, like for the majority of my life, was always like there was like go work in a business, go work at a hospital. Like that was the end goal. Never did I think, oh, I'm going to start my own business. So then to be in a position like towards the summer after I graduated, to think to myself, like, am I going to go pursue a full-time opportunity, or am I going to focus on my startup full time? And is the startup making any like is ParaWave like off the ground, and is like ParaWave like generating revenue, and is ParaWave like this like super successful startup business? Not yet. There's still a lot of work that we have to do to get to that point. But I also told myself, like, I'm really passionate about ParaWave. It's a really incredible opportunity. Been building it for over a year now. Maybe let's take that risk and let's see what happens. And I was also, I mean, and both for me and my co-founder too, Jack, we're both really passionate about ParaWave. And we also said, if we're doing something else, even if that something else is part-time, it's going to be really juggle time. It's going to be really difficult to balance like a part-time job, or like even like a full-time job, and also the business as well. And we have I think the benefit of being young, of we're in our early 20s. So if we're gonna, a lot of people told us that, like, hey, if you're gonna make mistakes, might as well do it now. But I'll even say too, there's a lot of adults that are like halfway through their careers, and then they decide to stop and to pursue their startup full time. And I don't think that age should be a discriminator. Now there might be more responsibility, especially if you have a family, et cetera, and more mouths to feed. But I think that anybody can pursue their startup at any moment. And if they're able to, and they see the opportunity to take it, if they're able to. It is risky. It is not guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed. Every startup goes to the valley of death. But if I think that one of the biggest things that an entrepreneur can do is, rather than say like, oh, the future is uncertain, or like everything's uncertain, is categorize that risk and then find ways to de-risk that uncertainty. Take the uncertainty, classify into risk, and then find ways to de-risk, to then come up with a structure and plan to then to pursue that startup. I know I think earlier I said like, oh, like if a individual's like, yeah, pursue that startup full time, it's very, if you have a family, it's much more difficult to say that. But I think that if there's a will, there's a way. It might be 80 hours of grueling work per week, or 80 plus hours of grueling work per week. But if you're really passionate about what you're doing and you have a vision of where you're going, humans can do some really phenomenal things. And there's a lot of resources and people out there that are willing to help. I think it would be a lot more difficult starting a business 100 years ago. I think now, I mean, with like student competitions or entrepreneurial communities for anyone, not just for students, but for any entrepreneur at any stage of life, it's really exciting to see that embracing and creating support systems, and celebrating not just the successes, but also celebrating the setbacks of like, hey, you're learning it and you're persevering through it. I think that's just as important.
I love what you brought up about risk and categorizing risk, right? Almost putting a face on the risk, I think, is important, because I get this from a book, 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I'm not sure if you're very big into reading books or not, but good. Yeah. Yes. Context clues, Matt. I'll get better at that.
No.
One of the things he brings up
in the background, but it ended up.
Yeah. One of the things he brings up in that book is the idea of, kind of like what I said, putting a face on that risk, and knowing that instead of just going through life, maybe you have an idea and not pursuing it because, oh, it's really risky, it's this, kind of actually dissecting what that risk is, and going through, okay, what is the worst case scenario? What is, if that's the worst case scenario, it's probably not likely to happen. So what is a scenario that's better, still not ideal, but more likely to happen, right?
Sure.
And then kind of going from there and deciding whether you're able to take that jump. Like you said, if you have a family, there's obviously different factors that go into those decisions, but really putting a face on the risk, and then determining for yourself whether it's worth that reward. Because I think a lot of people have a lot of brilliant ideas and they don't necessarily act on them because of unknown or masked risk in a way that doesn't really have a face to it, and they haven't really looked into it as much. Another common theme that we've brought up a lot today already has been the idea of team building, fostering those relationships within the team. What's kind of the approach that you've taken to that so far? Maybe, any advice, anything, just go ahead and run with it, Adithya, as far as team building goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I think everyone approaches team building in very different ways. There's no one way to do team building. But I think for any team building, being authentic and genuine, I think that's the most important aspect of any individual that's building a team or building a community or bringing people together for a purpose. I think that for any community building or any team building, being able to articulate the vision, the goal, and the structure to facilitate achieving that, like to taking that team through that journey is really, really important. And I think for any startup, the finding the right co-founder or finding the right co-founders, that initial few people that are starting the business up, that is really, really, really important. I would say I'm super lucky to have the best co-founder that there is, Jack. I mean, we were great friends before we started ParaWave. So it was great that our foundation was our friendship, and then to start ParaWave, it was incredible. It wasn't like we just met. It's like, hey, let's start a business. Like, we knew each other before that. And he's an incredible co-founder, very passionate, very driven, very honest, and has the qualities that I look for in a friend. But also a lot of those qualities overlap in terms of what I look for a business partner, of someone that I want to work with, and someone that I trust and I enjoy working with. But also, and I think for any team, a culture of honesty. I think it's really, really, really important, of making sure that whatever the values are of, whether it be communication, honesty, being proactive, listing out those values, and then as a co-founding team or as a team, or even if, let's say, it's one person starting up the team, looking honestly of, am I seeking out individuals that match these qualities for that team? But also, too, the most important part is, am I myself embodying those values and qualities? Because I can say, hey, these are all the qualities I'm looking for in a team. But if I myself am not matching those qualities, how can I demand that from my team? And teamwork and building teams, it's a two-way street, because you're going to look at the team and say, like, how's the team doing? But the team's also going to look at you to see how you're doing. So really looking to empower individuals. I think empowerment's another aspect of giving people the freedom to perform and excel and to have that trust, but also ensuring that there's constant communication and honesty and transparency in terms of our objectives, our deliverables being met. Are people performing the way that they need to achieve those goals? So I think that I've read a lot of and heard a lot of people talk about the difference between leadership and being a manager. Leaders empower, managers tell people what to do. And I think being a leader is a really important aspect of any type of team building. But also, especially for any startup, too, finding the right co-founders, or finding co-founders that you trust and want to work with. That's really incredible. And I'll say that I'm very lucky to have an incredible co-founder, Jack, and it's also it's a lot of fun working with him. He's fantastic to work with. And it's been a year and a half since we started, and we're still going. So we're doing something right, and we're still going with the same momentum, if not more. And we're excited for the journey to come.
Overlapping qualities and values, I think, is important, and complementary skill sets, right? I think those are two ways you can kind of categorize the perfect sort of co-founder, or team member, I think. to have complementary skill sets, but then overlapping qualities, and values. And another thing you brought up with honesty, and you touched on it quick because you're talking from the context of team building, obviously, where honesty is huge between team members. But then you brought up even with yourself as a solopreneur, as a sole business owner and startup founder. Having that honesty with yourself is just as important as having honesty with others when you do eventually maybe have a team, because it allows you to hold yourself accountable, determine what you need to get done, where you're falling short, what areas you are really good at, whether you do need team members. That honesty within yourself, honesty in general, obviously, right, is just so critical. And having it not only with team members, but also with yourself, I think is extremely important, and a great point that you mentioned there. Another thing is innovation, innovative thinking, ideation, creative thinking. You guys obviously have a creative product. You're fixing a fairly creative need in society, and you're fixing it, a critical need, but through a creative lens, I would say. How do you go about innovating, coming up with new ideas, knowing when to pursue a new idea and knowing when to say, okay, that idea doesn't really fit, I shouldn't go with that one? Not only starting things from scratch, right, but then also determining and discerning when you should take action on something and when you should not pursue it.
Yeah, I think that for any team that's looking to innovate, the biggest people. So intuitively, I'm saying, all right, innovation means we have to brainstorm ideas. But the really critical part is, how do we go about brainstorming those ideas? Innovation demands ideas. So how do we get those ideas? And to get those ideas, the most important thing that needs to be done is fostering a space that encourages people to share ideas without fear of judgment, without fear of repercussions, without fear of criticism. And if you're in a space or in a team where you can freely share any idea that comes to mind, and you know that the people that you're sharing it with are not going to judge you or hold it against you or critique you, those are the best type of spaces to be in, where ideas are encouraged no matter how crazy or how out of the blue they are or how abstract. Creating those spaces, a space without fear of judgment. And those are the most innovative spaces too, where you can walk, like, it's like 30, 40, like rapid brainstorming conversation, ideas being tossed around left, right, and center. It feels kind of like you're in like an echo chamber, and like it's encouraging, like the energy just like skyrockets. And that type of, that energy, sometimes you have to go through 200, 300, 400 ideas before you find that one or two that work. And I think that depending also on the challenge too. I mean, some obstacles or some innovative solutions require research. Some require really deep thinking. Sometimes it requires the time and space to let your mind wander and think of something else before you approach before you approach creative thinking. And sometimes the ideas just come to you when you're not even trying to think of it. So I've had some ideas come in when I'm in the shower and I'm like, oh, like I should make sure I write this down, or I'm like mowing the lawn or taking the dogs for a walk. My mind wanders, and then I'm like, oh wait, like I didn't think of this. And creating the opportunities to let those ideas flow in, embracing it, and creating a space without fear of judgment with the team that you're working with. I think that's really, really important, especially for companies, teams, or startups that are looking to do something innovative. I know I touched upon sharing ideas, but the biggest for creating a space that encourages fostering ideas is listening. You have to make sure you're listening to the other people that are speaking. You're taking the time to actively listen to what they're saying, taking it in, internalizing it, and not tuning it out. So active listening to the ideas around you, and also encouraging, acknowledging, giving credit to the ideas that are implemented, and recognizing that, and spotlighting it as well. It's a culmination of a wide variety of different things. A lot of people say, I want innovation, but they don't do anything to support an environment that drives innovation. And you have to have the environment in order to get the solutions or to generate those ideas. And there's no perfect idea. There's just ideas that work really, really well, and there are ideas that just work better than other ideas. And it's all about the environment and space that you create.
I love that you brought up the showers because that's something for me that I so often, I think there is a deeper meaning to it though, right? Like it sounds funny, obviously, on the surface, but the amount of ideas I'll have then, or if you just go for a walk, right? Something like that. You mentioned letting your mind wander. And I don't even look, I know that's the phrase we use, but I don't even look at it as letting my mind wander. I think my brain is smarter than me. And I think people come to this conclusion when they're trying to think of something, they're trying to remember this thing and they just can't think of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go to somewhere else and their brain maybe immediately thinks of it, right? Or will still think of it and eventually it will come to them. I like to think of it kind of as your brain is smarter than you. You're trying so hard to focus your energy on where you think that idea or where you think that thought is located, but you can't find it. Where if you just take a back seat, let your brain do what it does, and you just kind of relax for a little bit, not a lazy relaxation, but almost like a, like a required efficient, innovative relaxation to allow your brain to just really actually think and free flow ideas, I think is absolutely huge. And finding that balance there, I think is also really crucial because it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to do, right? Especially for an entrepreneur. A lot of the times you think of, 80, 100-hour weeks, something absurd. And it's like, that doesn't mean you can't also do that, but there does have to be some time for a little bit of whether it's, meditation or whether it's just some sort of deep relaxing thought. So kind of let your brain be smarter than you in a way is how I like to phrase it at times.
Continuing to learn, I think that's a big thing too. Continuing to improve yourself and seeking out knowledge to learn. I think that being committed to being a lifelong learner, I think that's a really important aspect for any entrepreneur.
Which ties absolutely wonderfully into books.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most influential book you've ever read? And how do you approach reading as kind of a way to foster creative thinking as well and also continue learning?
I'm only allowed to pick one book. I've read a lot of books. If I had to pick one, I would say this is one of the books that I read very much. This was before I identified as an entrepreneur. This was very much before ParaWave started. But a book that I find myself going back to quite a bit is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And I thought that it really it was very much a big introduction for me to be more thoughtful and mindful in terms of how I approach the things that I do, whether the ways I interact with teams, the ways I look into creating or starting things. And it made me be really thoughtful in terms of my mindset. And I think that was one of the first few books that I read that really made me think about how I'm approaching my mindset and how I approach the work that I do. Because work is work, but how you approach it's really important, and how you engage with the people around you is really important. And I thought that book did a really phenomenal job. It was also, I think, one of the first few books that I read that was a catalyst in terms of me being very thoughtful and continuing to seek out an open mindset, of continuing to keep an open mind and a growth mindset. That's the word, growth mindset, fostering a growth mindset for continuous improvement. And I thought that was really empowering. And I highly recommend the book. There's also Brene Brown does a lot of really good podcasts and talks as well. And it's very thought provoking. And I think that I think that a lot of entrepreneurs or just any individual can benefit from that.
Well, you heard it there. Dare to lead. Adithya, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. I had a whole lot of fun. It was awesome conversation, and I'm excited to hopefully have you on again sometime down the road in the future. And I'm wishing you all the best in all of your endeavors, and especially with ParaWave as well.
Hey, thank you so much, Matt, for having me. This is a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate our discussion, and I would love to come back in the future. And thank you.